If you watched my last countdown, top 10 worst finales in video games, you might be aware that I'm not exactly the biggest fan of This Is the Police's ending. But I stuck with it. I wanted to see what I would get at the end of the game, and what I got was a slap in the face! However, despite this, there is one part of the ending that I do find somewhat interesting. You see, it gets revealed that Jack's deputy, Martin Stett, turned up dead, but it's never quite revealed why. I mean, obviously it's murder, but we don't know who did the murder. And that's the question that I'm here to answer today. Who killed Martin Stett? I'm going to go over a couple of simpler, less interesting explanations before I delve deep into the bigger one, which is honestly the one I think's the most likely. This first explanation seems to be what they were implying. It is not hard to believe in the slightest that Stett got tangled up with the Mafia. Jack has said on multiple occasions that nearly everyone in his police department has gotten tangled up with illegal stuff at one point or another. In fact, Martin Stett's predecessor, Francis Kendrick, left the force because of his Mafia connections. Either he was with them from the beginning and he went against them and that's why they killed him, or much more likely, while Jack was in a coma for the second time, they needed an inside man on the force, but Stett refused, so they made him disappear. Who am I kidding? It's already implied he was on their payroll anyway. This explanation doesn't actually have that much evidence pointing towards it, but I thought it was still worth mentioning. The only reason I thought of this is because when it says that Stett's dead, it also mentions that his body was mutilated, which is very similar to what happens whenever one of your snitches turns up dead. Now I'll admit, we don't know for sure if it's the other police officers that kill your snitches, but come on now. They're really the only ones who would have a problem with the snitch because they're the ones who the snitch is spying on. And it's clear that they're getting killed because they're a snitch. I mean, you don't have any other police officers randomly turning up dead. I mean, they do die, but that's mainly because they get killed on the job. But anyway, on to my final explanation, and the one I'm the most proud of. That's right, I am convinced that Eugene Chaffee is the man behind the death of Martin Stett. I say behind the death of because I doubt he actually went out and killed Stett himself. I think he sent someone else out to do it. It seems a lot more like his style. Now, why do I think he did this? Well, I think it was because of the election. With the scenes that we get of Martin Stett, he comes off as a pretty reasonable, level-headed guy.
I understand that's been hard on you, but I think we should focus on your retirement problem. We finish this, then we'll figure something out, okay? One thing at a time.
So he probably wouldn't be on the side of attacking and killing one of the political candidates to guarantee the other's victory. Sure, he did help Jack out earlier in the game with the gang war, but Jack needed to participate in that to stay alive. Here, though, he doesn't actually need to help one of these two men kill the other. So now I think the big question here is, why don't I think Rogers did it? Well, honestly, I don't think he would think to do it. That's not to say he's a good person. He's not. He's a racist, sexist, homophobic, openly nepotistic serial rapist. But at the same time, he's also not very smart. I mean, he constantly has peaceful protests gather outside of City Hall, and every single time he orders Jack to disperse them because he can't defend himself against them. Not to mention, in the scene where he tries to convince Jack to side with him, he pulls out an old saying the same way Robespierre would, but Jack manages to turn it on him by the time the scene's over.
I've stayed in my position because at the very beginning of my career, I learned an important rule. If someone, anyone, friend or enemy, if they want something bad enough, you can hook them with it.
Not a year and a half, Mr. Rogers. For the rest of my life.
You think you can dictate terms, Jack?
Yeah. Because if someone wants something bad enough, you can hook them with it.
But it's not just because Rogers is stupid, it's also because it fits so well with what Chaffee's been doing throughout the entire game. I didn't notice it when I first played the game, but after I looked back on it, it became clear that Chaffee throughout the entire game was practically grooming Jack to join him in this resistance. I'll start with a part of this plan that concerns Stett. As Act 3 approaches, Robespierre basically eliminates everyone in Jack's life that he can talk to and would be able to talk him out of this. First off was Lana. For those those who don't know, in Act 2, Jack befriends an up-and-coming prosecutor named Lana. They talk to each other on the phone a bunch and become really close friends. However, at the end of Act 2, Lana digs up all the information about Jack cooperating with a bunch of criminals, and it's made clear that those files were given to her by none other than Robespierre. Since they both shared so much with each other, if their friendship continued into Act 3, Jack probably would have shared his situation with her, and well, she might have been able to talk him out of it. Next up is Christopher Sand / Vicus Varga, depending on who you sided with. Now, granted, talking to the leader of a gang might not be the first choice that Jack would go to, but it's shown, at least with Christopher Sand, that he can be a fairly nice guy to talk to, and would maybe be able to offer Jack some advice. But once Act 3 gets started, it gets revealed that Robespierre killed the mafia leader and passes it off as doing Jack a favor because now he doesn't have to work for the mafia. However, that's also kind of a curse when you consider the fact that they also give you a pretty good stream of cash. And then we get to Martin Stett, and it's pretty much the same situation with him. Granted, at least in the beginning, Jack definitely doesn't consider Martin Stett a friend.
Never. Because you couldn't care less. And I don't care for you either, Stett. It wasn't me who appointed you deputy, and you wouldn't have been my first choice.
He at least does trust him enough to get his help with a few things, and would probably talk to him about this situation and try to get his advice, which is why Robespierre decided it would be a good idea to get rid of him. And some of you may be wondering if Robespierre would actually be willing to do that, but considering the fact that he sent a serial killer after people because they weren't going to testify against Mayor Rogers, yeah, I think it sounds like something that he would do. But then of course the other part of his plan is to make it so that Jack would side with him. I mean, just look at their first interaction.
Good morning. What do you want?
A big mug of beer.
We don't serve big mugs of beer.
Then a small mug of beer.
We don't have beer in any size glasses. This is a family restaurant. Moms and dads come with small children. I can bring you a lollipop to suck on.
Monica, where's your famous charm? Bring the gentleman a beer. I'm sure you've got a bottle under the counter. Check between the dead cats and the dried heads of your ex-boyfriends. This man, by the way, is your police chief.
But beyond that, there are plenty of other examples, such as with the Mafia with both my previous example and giving Jack the opportunity to take them down on his own, as well as giving him the opportunity to turn in an infamous serial killer. Not to mention the most prominent of his favors, the fact that Robespierre will notify Jack how the Mafia and City Hall feel about him every day. Not to mention, he has his own guy at City Hall, Troy Starr, be the one who does most of the interacting with Jack, and he doesn't exactly come off as the most pleasant of people. All of this making it more likely for Jack to side with him during the assault than Mayor Rogers. And there you have it, that's my theory. Martin Stett was killed by one of Robespierre's goons as part of an elaborate plan to get Robespierre to become mayor. Now, while I do feel pretty confident in this explanation, keep in mind it is just a theory. As far as I know, it hasn't been confirmed by the developers or anything. But anyway, with all that said, I'm Dafawfulizer, and I'll see you in the next video.